Hello, I'm Marny Stanier with the Weather Channel. For several years, the Weather Channel has been producing a series of award-winning documentaries on subjects from earthquakes to hurricanes. Now these programs are available to you for your home video library. Here's a preview of an upcoming release.
What climatic changes led to the Ice Age or the extinction of the dinosaurs?
There are no dinosaur fossils in the rocks above this layer. This layer marks the extinction of the dinosaurs.
What secrets does a 7,000-year-old tree hold?
So you can think of the trees as kind of being like little thermometers and rain gauges scattered across the landscape if you know where to look.
What can we learn about our future by studying ancient climatic events? The Climate Puzzle, coming for your video library from the Weather Channel. Watch for it this summer.
The program you're about to see, Superstorm 93, is an exciting look at the storm that affected our country from Texas to Maine, the weekend of March 13th. Immediately following the program is a collection of news reports and some extraordinary home video that we have gathered from around the country. This will give you an even closer look at the dramatic impact of the storm.
From the Weather Channel, a special presentation. In early March, winter dealt a sweeping and deadly blow. The winds howled from Florida to Maine. Coastlines were ravaged. Across much of the eastern United States, all movement stopped, buried under the weight of the blizzard. It was a storm like few had ever seen. Superstorm 93.
Across Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, the winter storm of '93 began as rain, thunder, snow, and sleet. By storm's end, over 230 people would lose their lives. The impact would be felt from Cuba to Canada. Earlier that week, even before people saw the first effects, forecasters identified the ingredients that would create this superstorm.
Primarily there were three things. One, a very big late-season Arctic outbreak plunging down pretty much right over the North Pole and down into the lower 48 of the United States. Second ingredient was warm, humid air lurking over the Gulf of Mexico, Florida, and the Gulf Stream, and the warm waters themselves. And last but not least, very big dip in the jet stream, a couple disturbances helping carve that out, and that created this immense cluster of thunderstorms over the Gulf of Mexico, and once that happened, everything just went crazy. This one had everything came together perfectly, and the rest is history.
But it's not going to be a 2 or 3 day event. It won't have to be. It's going to go down in the record books. Bet on that.
In the Gulf of Mexico, winds increased to hurricane force. Water began to batter the coastline of northwestern Florida.
About another hour before it's high tide, so you know we're going to have some water down here.
By early morning, the storm surge reached 10 feet in places. The beach communities of Taylor and Dixie counties were caught by surprise.
Absolute horror is all I can tell you. We did not get enough warning, and nobody realized it would be this bad. If we knew there was going to be flooding, we would have left.
And I kept thinking it was going to let up, but it never let up. It just kept coming. Well, I watched my house fold pieces at the time, and I was standing on the back deck, and when the back deck went to fall in, that's when I got off of it. And there wasn't no fighting it. We just swam with it and let it carry us till we got to where we could touch the ground.
Waves and debris crushed homes, tossed cars, and destroyed lives.
And I was so scared, and I was praying, and I was praying and praying and praying, and I'd fall on my knees, and I started hearing people scream for help. And there was a gentleman, the first one that come through between the firehouse out there and the house, and I was in that bedroom window right up there. And I had my window open at that time because it was coming mostly from this direction. And I said, honey, hold on to something. He said, oh God, somebody help me. And I screamed as loud as I could scream. And I said, grab something and hang on. And I never did hear another word from him. And they found him under that debris pile out there. And he lost his life.
9 other residents in the beach communities lost their lives during the storm. For many people, the water rose so fast, escape was impossible.
When we came out to walk out, the car was floating. Well, the truck had already drifted off, and we just decided,
The boat was gone, everything was
we'd better
going.
just stay here. In just a few minutes, the front part of the old trailer began to just disintegrate.
Ray and Lucy Bailey, in their 80s, managed to hang on to this palm tree for 4 hours, their heads just above water. They were finally rescued by neighbors.
It was hard work, though, to stay in that tree. I think a desire to live had a lot to do with it.
Within hours, the water was gone, and so were entire rows of houses. In Dixie and Taylor counties, over 500 structures were destroyed. Another 500 were damaged. Although the forecast for the storm was accurate, emergency management officials were surprised by the magnitude of the tidal surge and the destructive power of the winds.
We believe that the storm was underestimated, the flooding part of the storm. I think people were aware we were going to have some severe weather, primarily tornadoes and things of that nature, but the flooding, the tidal surge, we believe was underestimated, and these are things that we need to work on. So we do have that lead time to move people out of the low-lying areas, so we're not impacted with the flooding.
How did the storm create such a large surge? As the low-pressure system intensified in the Gulf of Mexico, the winds ahead of the storm strengthened out of the south. This may have helped pile water up into the northeastern Gulf. Strong westerly winds then swept in to create the Maine storm surge, which reached 9 to 12 feet in places.
This was rather unprecedented now. You have to remember in its scope. It's almost unheard of to get that kind of a storm surge from a storm in the Gulf of Mexico in a non-tropical system, and that's what this was.
The storm threatened lives at sea as well as on land. The Coast Guard rescued over 160 people from the swirling seas. As wind and water hammered Florida's northwest Gulf Coast, other areas in the state were being pounded by a tremendous line of severe storms. Trees and power lines fell from Tallahassee to West Palm Beach. Ironically, a tornado touched down in Dade County, destroying one of the tent cities built to house those who had lost everything to Hurricane Andrew.
We actually observed the funnel cloud just above us. And once I got my heart out of my mouth and looked out the window, we saw that the tents were just blowing away. And we literally lost 24 tents right then, within a matter of minutes.
All residents were evacuated. Later, they returned to find their temporary homes demolished.
A terrible experience. It was a heartbreaking experience to see the little things that I save and I have with my kids, my 5 kids, I lose everything again. And I had to start all over again, afresh.
Once again, across Florida, people are picking up the pieces and starting over. Like those inflicted by Hurricane Andrew, the scars from this storm will not easily heal.
I relive it when I go to bed. The people that lost their life, and I can't help but blame myself because I couldn't get to them. But God was merciful, and He saved my life.
In Florida, Superstorm 93 ravaged the state with severe storms and flooding. To the north, the storm took on a different but just as deadly face.
The storm came on shore during the course of the night on the panhandle of Florida, then moved northeast across Georgia. At the same time, there's some very cold air coming in the upper part of the atmosphere. The combination of the two caused heavy snow to begin falling across many places that Friday night and that Saturday morning.
It howled northward from the Gulf of Mexico and into the deep south. Residents at first looked forward to a nice dusting of snow just in time for the weekend. But soon their joyous anticipation was replaced by the shock of a deadly blizzard, in some places like none that had been seen in more than 100 years. The weight of ice and snow felled trees, which blocked roads and downed power lines over much of the southeast.
Who'd believe a little bit of snow caused this much trouble?
For these folks in Atlanta, falling trees created a more immediate danger than loss of power. Trees came crashing down on their house.
I just heard this loud thud, and Bill was in one of the back rooms working, and I heard him scream, "Oh my gosh," and I knew something was wrong then.
Motorists in the South, unaccustomed to driving in even minor snowstorms, were caught off guard by the blizzard. This tow truck operator was waiting for a truck to tow him out when a camera crew arrived.
What are you gonna have to do?
Let's call a wrecker for a wrecker. Get me out.
Interstate 75 was closed at the Tennessee-Georgia line for days. Northbound vehicles backed up for more than 80 miles.
You gotta go back south, it's shut down. Should be open sometime late this evening.
Many travelers were students heading back from spring break in Florida, out of food and money, forced to turn back to the South. Emergency vehicles fared no better than others. Delays in transit meant that many fires, which in normal weather might have been quickly doused, burned out of control. Much of the property damage in the South was caused by the snow itself. Buildings which were not designed to carry the load wilted under the weight of the snow and ice.
While the center of the surface low pressure system was still in Georgia, heavy snow was breaking out hundreds of miles in advance of the center of the low. So you did have heavy snowfall rates covering much of the eastern seaboard at the same time.
When the leading edge of the storm reached the Smoky Mountains, backpackers unaware of the storm's magnitude began to feel its bite. Military helicopters were called in to rescue stranded hikers in and around the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Among them, from Detroit, a group of more than 100 students and their chaperones. They were part of an Outward Bound program in the mountains to try out their survival skills. What they wound up with was the test of a lifetime, and they passed.
Well, we just dug ourselves out and decided that the best thing to do would just be stay there until we thought we could walk out, until the snow was broken in enough, I guess.
I was just so positive. I tried to be so positive the whole time. And it got hard, but we made it.
300 miles from the Smokies, fierce waves crashed onto the entire length of the Carolina coast. An amateur photographer grabbed these dramatic shots of a pier on Surfside Beach, South Carolina. It was battered by waves for hours, and finally, it gave way.
This had a very strong surge of wind coming around the bottom of the storm from the south and west. And it was this surge of wind which contributed to all the wild weather in Florida, and then also caused the extremely strong winds along the South Carolina coast.
As the storm moved up the coast, these winds continued. Just south of New York, on the Jersey shore, the town of Seabright braced for the oncoming killer storm. The isthmus on which Seabright sits is but 100 yards wide. It separates the Shrewsbury River from the raging Atlantic. And when the blizzard came through, the ocean poured over the seawall, across the isthmus, and into the river, flooding the town. This woman was trying to get to her boyfriend's house. She was rescued by a New York area television news crew, which found her surrounded by a rising tide of ice and water. National Guard troops evacuated most of Seabright's 1,800 residents. It's getting to be a routine. The town has taken several beatings by the weather in recent years. Last December, a nor'easter drove the ocean higher than did the March blizzard. Some residents have had enough of evacuating and rebuilding. Among those, Chuck and Virginia Seiden, who've rented out the house they've owned for 10 years and have moved inland. They have a 9-month-old baby, and Virginia can't take the thought of going through another storm.
It concerned me being trapped. If there was ever an emergency and I had to get the baby to a hospital or had to leave and was not able to leave, that was very frightening to me.
The brunt of snowfall in the blizzard was up the spine of the Appalachians and across Pennsylvania. As in the south, roads, power lines, and buildings were impacted. The surface low pressure moved into upstate New York, an area where heavy snowfall is common, but not this heavy. Even in Syracuse, the storm set a record for snowfall in a single storm at well over 40 inches. In New York City, residents dug their way out quickly, but freezing temperatures made road clearing more difficult than usual. Airports in New York were typical of those from Florida to Maine. As the blizzard came through, many airports closed and most flights were either canceled or delayed. As the storm moved up the coast of New England, the same winds that swept the Carolinas and New Jersey whipped the sea up to ominous levels. Residents were expecting the worst, but a last-minute shift in wind direction just before high tide reduced the coastal flooding. For Mainers, the storm only amounted to a bit more inconvenience than the average winter storm. From Maine, the storm headed up the Canadian coast and out into the North Atlantic, leaving behind a swath of destruction covering the entire eastern third of the U.S.
By whatever measure you wish to make, whether it's the overall circulation pattern, the total extent of the storm damage all the way from Florida through Maine, the total amount of snow dropped on this nation, not the depth at any one place, but the total volume of snow, is tremendously impressive numbers when you start to see the expanse of the storm, the depth of the storm, the intensity of the storm, all the way from Florida to Maine, all the way from Ohio to the coast.
Sunday, March 11, 1888. A blizzard meteorologists say only happens once in 500 years. Like the '93 blizzard, it was a mid-March storm. The two storms formed in much the same way, but the blizzard of '88 ravaged New York and New England for 2.5 days.
Well, it started raining actually in New York City in the late afternoon on Sunday. And as the afternoon went on, it got colder and colder and colder, and the temperature dropped from the 50s to the 40s to the 30s. And then shortly after that, as the evening went on, the rain changed to snow. The snow began to come down and began to accumulate 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night. Not only did it accumulate, but the winds began to pick up. So by the time we got toward the midnight hour, we were looking at a full-fledged blizzard in New York City, which raged on until really Tuesday morning.
400 people died in the 1888 blizzard, 200 of those in New York City. Transportation came to a crashing halt. Trains derailed throughout the region. Everyone was stranded. It took weeks to recover from the storm. Snow drifted and piled over second-story windows. It was carried out of cities in rail cars, tons and tons of it. This storm would have been devastating if there had been warning, but there was none.
Well, the forecast for that day was basically increasing clouds, some rain during the afternoon, which was a Sunday afternoon, and temperatures maybe in the 50s and falling down to the 40s.
But where the '88 forecast failed, meteorologists in 1993 saw their big storm coming days in advance. And yet the death toll seems enormous for our times, more than any other single weather event in the United States since the day of the killer tornadoes in 1974. Most could have been avoided if the victims had heeded the warnings. Dr. Brooke Fishoff is a psychologist at the Carnegie Mellon University. He studies why people take risks and how they make decisions.
One of the things that's particularly surprising about this storm is that the weather forecasters said with such great confidence that this storm was coming. We're not kidding this time. And when they promised us a big storm, there was some percentage of us who said, well, this is just like other promises in the past. I've got important things to do. I'll probably be able to get through. Of course, they're unhappy when, they may be unhappy or worse when things don't work out, and it's easy for us to criticize them in hindsight. So conceivably, those are rational. Those are rational decisions. It's just hard to see the rationality when they haven't worked out.
Travis Archer was a victim of this storm. He loved fast cars and 4x4s. Friday night of the storm, he and 7 of his friends set out in 2 Jeeps for the North Georgia mountains. Travis did not return. Gary Davenport, Travis's brother-in-law, was part of that tragic outing. He's a hunter, outdoorsman, trained in survival.
We was all ready to go. It's something to do. You don't see snow that much around here when you hear something like that. You want to go play in it. It wasn't so bad until we turned off on a little Jeep road. That's the one we got stuck on. Trees was just, they were falling over the road, and we had an axe. We'd get out and chop them in two and go on.
When the first Jeep got stuck, all 8 people got into the second one and tried to turn back, but huge trees blocked the dirt road, and they were stranded.
You could hear trees popping, wind. It was getting worse, I could tell.
Saturday at daylight, with the blizzard still raging, Travis Archer and Bobby Hobbs decided to walk for help. Sunday morning was even colder than Saturday. With no heat in the Jeep, they were desperate. The group decided they had to walk out.
I had on a pair of tennis shoes. I had on a pretty good pair of briskets that had a line around them. I had on a t-shirt and a thin jacket. Snow was above your knees, and my leg was numb. From my knees down, there's numb. Couldn't hardly feel them. My hands, after I got dry, my hands was all right because I kept them in my pockets. It was painful until it just got numb and you couldn't feel it.
They were rescued Sunday evening, all but Travis Archer. Travis had frozen to death Saturday night while he and Bobby Hobbs slept in the open.
Obviously, each death is its own tragedy and it has its own story. I think there are perhaps a number of things about this particular storm that may have caught people unawares. I think one is that the sheer magnitude of the storm was outside of many people's experience. Think about the category of event that you're dealing with and say, gee, if this is something that I don't have a lot of first-hand experience with or haven't been trained in, there are likely to be some surprises hidden here. I don't know what those surprises are, but there are likely to be some. So if somebody tells you there's the storm of the century and you're less than a century old, then presumably there are some surprises hidden here, and you probably ought to adopt a generally cautious policy.
Gary Davenport learned that lesson.
Not to go out playing in it, and if it's going to be a dangerous snow, you never do know what can happen. Just, I'd call all my friends that's got 4-wheel drives and tell them to stay in the house for one. It can get dangerous quick.
The Superstorm of '93 was beyond most of our experience. Few have ever seen anything like it, and it didn't end when the sun came out Sunday, March 14th. There was enough moisture in the snow that fell in this storm to fill the Mississippi River for 40 days. And when the snow melted, the runoff swamped towns and cities all along the eastern seaboard. Floodwaters forced residents out of their homes from West Virginia to Massachusetts. It will be months before we've tallied the full extent of the damage from this storm. It was the 4th largest catastrophe in the U.S. in terms of insured damage. Some estimate the total damage will be from $3.5 to $4 billion. And the death toll was higher than in any weather disaster in this country for almost 20 years. 26 states were hit. It affected more than 50% of the nation's population. It joins the ranks of the storms of legend, storms we tell our children and our children's children about, like the blizzard of '88, the hurricane of '35, the superstorm of '93.
We hope that watching Superstorm 93 has given you a better understanding of how dangerous severe weather can be, whether it's snow, tornadoes, or flooding. For a closer look, we have compiled a series of reports filed by television stations from around the country. But first, we will start with some remarkable home video shot during the tidal flooding in Florida and eyewitness accounts of that terrible ordeal.
Well, the feeling was that the mobile home would just deteriorate, but it didn't. And what happened toward the end of that 3.5 hour stay in the water, we just decided that it was time to exit. If we didn't know if we would make it or not. But the force of the water was just tremendous in the unit. The waves would come over and go over our heads, and then it would go back, and then it'd come over and go over our heads and go back, and we just kept trying to keep our heads up out of the water.
Let's see, how many houses was there?
There was 8 houses, and the apartments. There's 4 of them and the store building.
Well, tell that to the camera right up to the mouth.
There was 8 rental houses right in this area, and the apartment building, which there was 4 apartments, and the store building with the boardwalk and all. It's all gone.
5:30 in the morning, there were probably 6 to 7 feet of water coming under the house at the rate of 30 to 40 miles an hour. Winds were gusting up to 114 miles an hour. I watched both of my cars float away into the canal.
Okay, I'm looking at my motorhome and my Honda car. I can see all the way through the motorhome. There's the top of the Honda car. But the south wind has had it.
But we had an awful amount of flooding, and it came so quick that everything went under. And there was about approximately 4 feet of water in our garage that we were wading through. Everything started to float. The freezers were turning over. Just everything was coming in on us. Timbers, limbs, what haven't you. It was awful.
We become aware it was raining so hard toward the Gulf, the wind was out of the southwest and it shifted around to the west, that we couldn't see out the windows on the Gulf side anymore. But we could see objects come over the highway, and waves by then were anywhere from 6 to 8 feet breaking over the road. And the old Pavilion restaurant started breaking up, and then the motel, and we just saw pieces of it. Looked like it was eerie. Chunks looked like a battleship out there, of course, and it went right around our house. The only thing that saved my house is I planted many little cedars years ago around the place, and they've grown up to about 20 feet high, and they broke the force of the waves and the wind.
see anything like this in the
Never.
In the time
No.
No,
Never.
we've been here
And people
25
that have
years.
been here 50 and 70 years, and then say they've never seen anything like this.
Somewhere in history,
And yet we
there's-
never got any warning.
Tide's going down, thank the Lord. The store building that used to be there is no longer there. I see a few pilings where the store was.
Friday morning, March 12th, we see the first glimpse of what's about to come. The flurry sparks people to grocery stores to stock up on food, but even some folks there don't believe the predictions. Friday afternoon, the snow is back. At first, it seems so peaceful. Early that evening, the scenes look more like a Christmas card or a ski resort. But we soon know this isn't just a winter storm, it's a blizzard.
Oh, there he goes. Okay, now start going forward one time. Oh, God, Ryan, come back here.
This storm quickly paralyzes 18-wheelers and makes our highways seem like Siberia, not the South.
Have you ever seen anything like it before?
I spent 2 years in Alaska and a year in Maine. It's similar to it.
Been in Birmingham?
Never. I've been here 40 years, never seen it like this.
The storm forces hundreds of people driving south to head to local motels to seek any kind of shelter they can find.
There's people laying on the couches, laying on the floors. They're not letting anybody in. They don't have any room.
We begin to see the first signs of a problem that grows enormous by morning. Power outages in conditions that make it nearly impossible for crews to do repair work. As the night turns to day, the snow continues, and we begin to see the full magnitude of this storm. As night returns, another problem. Temperatures drop well below freezing, icing over snow-covered roads. Finally, Sunday arrives. The snow has stopped and the freezing temperatures leave for the day. Now the digging out and the rebuilding begins, and the realization that an unprecedented storm has hit us.
This is the first time, I believe, that all 67 Alabama counties were under snow cover at the same time, combined with the fact that the snow was so heavy and wet, along with all of that wind and such extensive snow cover. Certainly, I would say the storm of the century.
We are going to get dumped on around here. I mean, something you haven't seen in a few years. Friday night, just plain snow. Accumulations will develop.
A lot of authority in your voice. This
Well,
is the
usually,
real thing.
no, usually I'm pretty conservative about this stuff, but this time it looks pretty good.
The big rush was right when people got off of work. A lot of people left work a little bit early, and of course the kids got out of school early, and that's when the rush was. In fact, this store did a record sales business today. More sales in one day than they've done in 3 years today. We're talking a lot of business. They're short on baby food, all canned foods. Bread, of course, is way short.
Not only are we going to get snow, we might see the coldest temperature so far for the winter season.
I wanted to take the show outside that night to let people be kind of part of history, because I knew there were a lot of people who would be watching who had never seen a snowstorm like that and likely would never see another one again.
Oh, it was fun. What an experience. I think it gave viewers at home a feel for what was going on. That's really what we were trying to do, was to give them a feel for the storm and how it was starting. And it was a fun experience. It was cold.
So it's going to continue 6 to 12, generally amount, and maybe more in the mountains. Bill, Heidi?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. We'll be here throughout the night, keeping an eye on the storm for you.
The storm of 93 is in full swing on this Saturday morning, March 13th, 1993. This is the scene outside Channel 3 studios on Whitehall Road.
The snow is pretty, it looks lovely, the kids are excited, boy, they're fired up. This is a very dangerous storm and a very dangerous situation.
Our blanket statement this morning is that all the roads are in bad shape. That we can say with full confidence.
There's a lot of folks out there that need help right at this time.
The outpouring of goodwill we found here, I haven't had this in 15 years, man. They expect us to be down there in Atlanta at a certain time, and we're not going to be able to make it.
The blizzard of '93 roaring through Boston gave the city a surrealistic look. As the snow piled up, the hassles began, and Good Samaritans emerged from the whiteout conditions.
Go ahead, forward. Good, go ahead. Keep going. Keep going.
Ferocious winds manhandled pedestrians, many of them resorting to that curious habit of using umbrellas as shields. The umbrellas, of course, really becoming just one more thing to struggle with.
Having fun? Trying to make the best of the situation. I wouldn't recommend it though.
In fact, it officially wasn't recommended. Repeated warnings came out of City Hall.
There tends to be a little bit of a fascination with the big storm, and people tend to go outside. If they would just stay in the house, let us know about emergency situations, we can respond a lot faster.
Some emergencies were coupled with just plain old bad luck. We decided it was best not to try an interview with the owner of this Mercedes, or what was left of it. By nightfall, the city looked deserted, but wasn't. Boston's theaters proclaimed the show must go on. At the last minute, though, the Boston Ballet broke rank.
We came in early this morning to be able to secure a hotel room to come over to the ballet because the recording kept on saying that the ballet was definitely going to be on for the weekend. And yes, we are disappointed, very disappointed.
As the night wore on, the weather plot thickened. It started to rain. There I was in a Saturday Night Live shot talking about how the rain could complicate things.
And although officials are saying that things are under control in Boston, they are very worried about the possibility of dropping temperatures because that would create dangerous icy conditions.
At the airport, meanwhile, the storm was wreaking havoc with airline schedules.
U.S. air flights inbound and outbound are canceled today. We advise you to call our 1-800 number to rebook your reservations for tomorrow or whenever.
Some took the news of cancellations better than others.
Upset. I'm right on the edge.
I guess there's no reason to dwell on the past. We'll just look for a brighter future next spring break.
We wondered if her cheery philosophy would have worked on these two guys stuck in the mother of all traffic jams at the Callahan Tunnel.
Get in the car. Put it in reverse. Drive that way. Back up. Back up.
Go forward now.
Go forward now.
All right now, just take it easy.
With daylight came plummeting temperatures and rising tempers. The symphony of the honking horns and the spinning wheels played over and over. The big dig was on in every neighborhood. Of course, Mayor Flynn wouldn't have missed this chance to help Boston shovel out. After all, it doesn't snow like this at the Vatican. Although he claimed to enjoy it, a lot of people would probably agree with the sentiments of this man whom we encountered as the storm was just beginning.
Can't wait for summer.